Hey, Matt and Diane. Thanks for joining me today.
Morning.
Good to see you.
Yeah, I really appreciate this. Okay, so we're here today to talk about turning voice of the customer into revenue, some lessons in product-led growth. I'd love for us to go around and introduce ourselves. I'll start and kick things off. I'm Rosie Davenport. I'm the Director of Product Marketing at Alchemer. We're a feedback company. We specialize in building software to help folks collect and act on feedback at a very broad level. But Matt, why don't you go next? Tell us a little bit about yourself and your company.
Yeah, I'm Matt Burgess. I'm a director of web engineering here at Malwarebytes, and I'm honored to join today's discussion with Diane and Rosie. At Malwarebytes, we're protecting people from the world's evolving cyber threats. And over the years, what started as a very effective product that protect devices has now grown to an award-winning suite of products that trusted by millions of users worldwide. And we continue to provide that leading protection for devices. But now we are also protecting our customers' digital lives, and that includes things like privacy and identity, where criminals are very, very active right now. Our focus has always been really simple. Like, we want to make powerful solutions that simply work, and our customers love us for it. So today I'm joined by a close colleague at Malwarebytes, Diane Bodette. She's been instrumental in driving success at Malwarebytes and brings incredible insight to today's discussion. So Diane, would you please take a moment to
Oh,
introduce yourself?
thanks, Matt.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Well, I'm Diane Baudet, and I'm the Senior Manager of Customer Lifecycle Marketing at Malwarebytes. I've worked at Malwarebytes for the last 8 years. The majority of my career has been in the field of cybersecurity and in the field of analyzing and looking at customer feedback and taking those insights and getting people across companies to understand what our customers need, what customers need. And I've been doing that since I've been at Malwarebytes.
Yeah, I know you guys have really taken the lead at Malwarebytes building something really special. And that's, you listen to your customers, you've built a program that allows you to actually enable product-led growth. It's really special. I'm honored to talk to you about it today. Hopefully, some of you're sharing some insights here that'll help folks listening kind of figure out how they can mimic that same level of success. Just briefly take, the topics we're going to go through today. This is our agenda, kind of setting up why consumer trust is important, and how that factors into decision making, how you've used feedback to create these kind of trust building moments. Then operationally, what does that actually look like? Like, what are the nuts and bolts of it? And then how does that actually become a competitive advantage for you as a company? So let's jump in, shall we? We're going to kick things off with a stat here. So 34% of tech companies cite trust as a barrier to customer acquisition. I will say, being a feedback company who builds software, we see this every day. So many organizations, kind of complain about how a lack of transparency and credibility is a top obstacle for kind of what they're trying to do and what they're trying to achieve. I'd hazard a guess here, this stat. If we ask consumers, I think this number would actually be a lot higher. This is tech companies reporting. I think if we were to ask the consumers, it might actually be a little different. But it's an important part of what folks are trying to set up. Moving over to this next slide, as we think about today's market, we just talked about transparency with customers. It's this key foothold that allows for trust. Trust then enables buying decisions, helps folks figure out what they want to buy. Because we know there's a big connection between transparency, security, loyalty, customers just expect you to be honest and transparent. If you're not, they don't feel secure, then they probably don't want to use your product or stay with your organization. Diane, what we're looking at on the screen here, I understand these are real life customer quotes. If as we read through them, there's some good and bad reviews.
Right.
I'm going to make the assumption that every voice is important to you. But what do you do with these quotes? Where are they from? What do you do with them?
Well, so you understand that we probably get in the course of one quarter over 10,000 respondents. And of those respondents, at least 60% of them leave us some type of comment. That's very high. We have very vocal customers. And we take every comment that we get, and we take a look at it and we try to figure out if it's a good quote, that's a great, but why is it good? And is there something that we can glean from that? And then the ones and the ones that are bad, or the ones where people are frustrated or whatever, that's interesting for us. It's very important for us to understand where those friction points are so we can fix that for our customers. And sometimes it is just a frustration and something we need to change. Sometimes it's a matter of developing something new that a customer wants.
Yeah, and talking to you both, I get the sense asking customers for feedback is not just lip service. You're genuinely curious, you're genuinely interested in what they have to say. Matt, from your perspective, how does your team think about empowering trust with customers, right? So how does Malwarebytes set up a culture where transparency is so important?
Well, we'll get into a lot of the details, here in a minute, but I think it starts with us asking our customers for that feedback, and we'll talk about some ways that we do that very practically, and also how we encourage that. But it's giving the customer an opportunity to give us that feedback, and then when we get it, we celebrate that internally. Sometimes the feedback can be negative, especially if you're rolling out a feature that the teams were very excited to get out, and then maybe a comment comes in that's like, hey, this thing's not working quite right, or I don't understand it. That can be very demoralizing. But culturally, what we try to do is we try to celebrate those things and say, no matter what the feedback is, this was good that we got it, because it gives us this opportunity to respond to that and make things better. And if our culture and our company is all about putting the customer first, that's ultimately what we're all about. So developing that culture is very, very important. And for me, as a leader of a team, I think about that not only in how we serve our end users, but also how we interact with customers internally. We have different teams that we work with, serving different needs. So as a team and a team leader, like, we talk about that very specifically, like, hey, how are we serving our colleagues really well? How are we listening to them and getting their feedback and responding, to that? And also, we're in the middle of hiring right now. So as we're looking at candidates that we're going to bring into the organization, like, this is something that, as best we can, like, we want to bring people into the org that already have this as a value, if at all possible. And then when they join the team, we're going to focus intently on that during that onboarding period, just to convey, hey, this is a very, very important value. We want you to know from day one it's important. So, we're setting you up for success and setting you up to help the team, effectively.
Yeah, you're setting up kind of our next slide very perfectly here, which I appreciate, whether you did it knowingly or not. But I will say, I want to put you on the spot a little bit, both of you. I think I recall you saying that you actually post every quote, every customer quote, whether it's good or bad, you make them
Yeah.
publicly available.
There's a couple of ways we do it. And again, it's really important that all that information gets shared with everyone in the organization. When a customer criticizes a product, it's like criticizing your child. And the
Yes.
product folks can get, and rightfully so, they're very protective. And what we just need to show is that there's nothing wrong. They didn't do anything wrong. It's just that there's something about it that is a friction point and we need to fix it. And all of the input that comes in through NPS is shared on Slack with everyone in the corporation. We also have in product, there are two places inside the product where if there's something going on, either you're delighted by or you're not delighted, there's a place where you can put comments, and all of those comments go on Slack too. CSAT is also shared across the company, and that's also very helpful. And all of this is looked at and read by customer support, and and they take it and they work with the product marketing group the product development group to figure out what needs to be done.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
And just one last thing. It's not
yeah,
always
please.
just the product. I mean, it's also marketing. It could be something that
Yes.
needs to be said differently, or we need to educate customers. Customers still today have a very hard time understanding what VPN is. I don't
Yes.
know if we'll ever get over that.
Yeah, how do you communicate in a way that they'll understand? I completely understand. I think again, you're teaming me up perfectly to talk about common trust breakers here. And this is something I hear from our customers at Alchemer all the time. They want more impact out of their feedback program.
Mhm.
And I think a lot of the time folks aren't aware that they're actually breaking customer trust in a few really, really common ways.
Yeah.
So we look at the kind of what's on the screen here. The first thing is sending out a survey, you get responses, and then you never talk to the customer about what they told you, right? So we got all these responses and cool, they told us what they like or don't like. Super common. Second, you send out really generic surveys, and that's all you send. So maybe, NPS is a great survey, super important. But if it's the only thing you're doing and you're doing it once or twice a year, you're not really getting to the heart of what every customer cares about or how they're using your product or how you're communicating to them about that product in a really specific way. Um, and the third one here, we see different teams and orgs with a lot of siloed information. Maybe the product team gets feedback, they ask for feedback from users about a release, and they don't share it out broadly, right? So they kind of keep that information to themselves, they use it to improve the product. But maybe to your point, that might impact how marketing helps push for customer adoption in the future, right? Or support. There's this siloed information is very common. Um, so how do we address these, right? So what are some practical strategies? We're going to go into specifically how you guys have addressed some of these things, but I think some broad practical strategies folks can think about for building trust with feedback would be ensure you get back to a customer or customers after a survey. You send out a survey, tell them you heard them, give them what your plan is, let them know you have a plan to address it. Um, Tell them why you're building or changing a product, right? So based on what you've heard and how it might impact them. And then I think crucially, and you guys have done this, build a program where it's easy to share out the results with every team. So you don't have those data silos happening. It's really easy to get information cross-functionally into every part of the org. Ultimately here, trust isn't just PR, it's actually a strategy to develop better products. Um, we have a stat here, trust shapes 88% of consumer buying decisions. I know we're really hammering this point home, but folks don't want to buy something unless they know they can trust the company is transparent. And that's a huge amount of our consumers that are impacted by, who they consider to be trustworthy. Okay, so let's move on to our next topic. I think we've kind of set up the problem here. How do we actually build trust and drive product-led growth through a feedback program? We've been covering why transparency and trust are so important to customers. Let's get into the specifics. Diane, I'm going to tee you up. I'd love to hear more about how Malwarebytes has been able to actually harness feedback and enable product-led growth.
Sure. Well, we think of this product-led growth programmatically. It's not just a series of events, or it is actually a program that's laid out, and it's laid out across the customer life cycle. So we ask them for input, we keep track of them. There are other types of information that's being collected by the product engineers about how the product gets used. So we have a lot of different ways to look at, what's going on, and that helps us then refine our plans for like next year. We're in long-term planning right now, and so the executives and the leaders of the company are talking about, what are we going to develop next year? What are we going to change? What kind of programs do we want to run to make sure our customers are educated about what's going on in the arena or the business segment of cybersecurity. All of that really matters. It's complex, and it's just really important that it's programmatic and it has a lead, and everyone is watching this and everybody's got skin in the game so that we can make sure that we drive our company goals and the products in the right direction.
Yeah, I like that. So I'm assuming those executives are going to be very interested in hearing kind of the high level or maybe the specifics of, what folks are saying, what your customers are saying.
They like
Tell us.
they like the specifics Well, they like the specifics if they're really good, and also if there's something really going on that is showing up a lot in comments. And I read all the comments every week, and that's a lot of comments.
That is
But,
a lot of comments.
it's important that, and there are folks on this committee that we have the working council that look at me and ask to make sure that, okay, so is there anything else you're seeing giving, this is all, a lot of this is done by AI, but they want me to chime in just to see if I see a story evolving about something. And yeah, so
Yeah.
it takes a lot of work.
Well, you mentioned every comment. So that's kind of the first bullet point here. Tell us exactly what that means. Like, how do you do that? Where are you collecting feedback? What are the ways it's coming in? Who are you asking? What are the segments? And then, how has this developed kind of over time?
Well, so the customer support folks, deal with the customers on a daily basis, and usually it's something's wrong.
Yes.
So, so we get a lot of feedback, and they send out a note to folks asking, did we solve your problem? Is everything fine? And then the second request they get is, okay, so tell us what you think about the product, because those are two different questions. So they tell us about what the service they got, and they tell us about the product. So all of that is included in what we look at in terms of what customer feedback. We also do an NPS every 6 months, and this is for all products. That even includes trialware and what we call free, which is people who stay on trialware for a long time. That actually gets done in product. The rest of the customers get emails from us, and we have a fairly high rate, higher than most surveys get. And so we do all of that, and we get all those numbers back. The NPS tells us the what. The why comes from the sentiment analysis, and that is something that we've started within this last 12 months, and it's really been phenomenal to be able to find out the whys behind it. I mean, for me to read all the comments, and I was doing sentiment analysis on a spreadsheet, it was very difficult, and the analysis we could do was fairly rudimentary. This points us in very specific areas that we need, to take a look at, and with sentiment analysis, we can tell what we can see over time, some of the changes that have taken place, and we can see, did it help or did it not? Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. And so that lets us know then what we need to go back and take a look at. So. And
yeah, and I know we've talked about this. This is where purpose-built AI really
yes,
helps, right? So you don't have to actually go in and categorize every single, you want to collect all of this feedback. It's a ton of feedback to get on a daily basis. There's no way you as one human or even a team of humans can do it. So you have to have tools like purpose-built AI to actually be able to understand the sentiment behind it, right? And categorize it without human bias.
It takes a little time for the AI I have to say, when we first started it, I felt like the AI was grouchy. It was the responses I were getting, the culminated, this is what's happening, because it gives you like an overview. I'm like, wow, okay. And then now it's smoothed out, and given more feedback, it tells you a better story. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I know.
Cybersecurity feedback is very complex, and that's kind of somewhat of a problem. And it means that when we do look at sentiment analysis, we are constantly looking at, are we asking the AI to answer the questions we really need answered? And so we've made some significant changes since the beginning of us putting together sentiment analysis. So
I actually wanted to hear, Matt, in your role, because we've talked about this now. You guys work in this very technical field where maybe customers might have a hard time translating, some of the things you do into non-technical talk. When you're thinking about implementing feedback, how do you adapt that? Like, what are the tools, techniques? What's the thought process for you on adapting, technical to non-technical and vice versa?
Yeah, I think there's really an art to it, because especially the world that we live in, we or the industry that we're in, we're releasing products that didn't exist previously. And in some cases, it's an entire new category of thing that the general public's not aware of yet. So there's this big gap of, hey, we have this amazing product. It's very, very powerful. How do we explain to you what it does in a meaningful way so that you can use it for all that it's worth? And oftentimes when we launch these new products, we'll get feedback back. Diane mentioned like the marketing being a part of it.
Yeah.
That is a piece, right? Like there's the technical component, like how the thing works, what it does, but then there's this whole user experience that goes beyond just, if it's an application or a web-based product, it goes beyond that, right? It has to do with everything that we communicate about this. And for new products, that can take, quite a long time or a big investment up front to become familiar. So I think there's a bit of an art. Like we have people within the company like Diane that can understand the feedback and make sense of it and help interpret that for other people in the company. Whereas somebody that's not spending time in that, it'd be really easy for them to jump in and look in a comment and jump to some conclusion that may not be the right conclusion that we need to make decisions based off of, right?
Yeah.
So having like this team engaged, I think is really important. And I mean, it sounds like the AI is very, very helpful. Diana, it almost sounds like what AI is accomplishing for us now might have been even impossible prior, just due to
So
the magnitude of data that we're dealing with, right?
if you figure it's at least 6 or 7 thousand responses, written responses a quarter. Yeah. So that's around 30 to 40,000 responses.
Hmm.
So it's a lot.
Yeah.
One thing I was going to add about AI, we were talking earlier about the statistics about trust. This is just my opinion, but I think those numbers are going to become more pronounced, and a lot of it is like the negative side of AI. All the misinformation that we're seeing out there. I think people are going to become sensitive to that, and it's harder for them to distinguish between what's real, what's not real, right? So trust, I think trust is going to become even
I
larger of a
agree.
factor. So it
Yeah.
can be helpful. It can also be, detrimental in some ways.
Yeah. And how that transparency, explaining what you're doing, how you're doing it, that you're listening to folks, how that plays
Yeah.
into the trust aspect. I think that's huge.
And it
You know,
could be a
to
differentiator for businesses, right? The businesses
yeah,
that can do this
Yes.
really well, like you'll be able to take a big leap away from, maybe your competitors that aren't.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
absolutely true. You mentioned this earlier, translating things, technically, I work with our product team all the time. They're so smart. Sometimes they say things or write things or document things, and I'm like, I don't know what that means, guys. If I don't know what it means, our customers certainly aren't going to know what it means. And I think what I'm hearing is you guys have been able to, form a process here where you launch something, you're constantly improving. You don't rest on the laurels, right? It's like we launched
Yeah.
this. Was it really clear? No. Could we make it clear? Could we continually make it clear? Like that you're working together so seamlessly with the process you've developed to ensure that everything that goes out, ultimately becomes the best version.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm glad you mentioned that because especially when we're launching something new, like we've started to build in like plans to be acutely aware of that feedback. If it's something entirely new, like we're going to go ahead and plan like in those following weeks, like we're paying special attention to the feedback we get.
Yeah.
I think that's been really nice. In the past, maybe we would build something and kind of move on pretty quickly to the next thing. But
Yeah.
we've learned those lessons, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, okay, so we've talked about theory here. We've talked about how you've put that theory into practice. You're collecting a ton of feedback. You have a great process to go back and forth between teams here. Data isn't siloed, which all sounds lovely. It sounds exactly like we'd want. But, the proof's in the pudding. What are the outcomes you guys are seeing? So I'd like to kind of move into that to help folks understand that beyond just the words and the nice things we've talked about here, what have you actually been able to achieve? Dan, do you want to kick us off here?
Sure. So, over the course of this last year, well, let's see, Yeah, over the course of this last year, we've had our NPS has stayed fairly consistent, and it's going up to the right, which is great, and it's considered pretty high. I'm not going to tell you what it is, but it's considered pretty high in the
We'll
cybersecurity.
just think a very high score. Okay, I'll
Very
put
high
that,
score,
plant
right?
that. Yeah.
What we didn't know, I mean, so, and that's great, but again, why? And so what it was interesting is to every month I send out reports to the executives about what's going on. And in this last report from November to November, which is really when we started the sentiment analysis, I mean, we had set it up, but we didn't really launch the info because it takes it a while to actually be soup. So in some of the one product in particular, our sentiment has gone up 60 points, which is huge. And what was interesting is there is one product, it's a new product, and this is not unusual for new products, but we couldn't figure out, there were 4 different subscription plans to this product, and we couldn't figure out why. There was something going on that was pulling the NPS down. Anyway, so I went to sentiment analysis and I split these different subscription plans apart, and I was able to, and then I went in and looked at the themes, the words that were being, populated and were being looked at by the AI. And we actually found that there was one product that was bringing everything else down. And it just turned out that there's one aspect of the product that people just don't understand. And so that we know is a problem. We know we need to figure it out. It's not necessarily it's not necessarily a product problem. It's more an education problem, and people understanding what this product does and how it works, and they don't understand that, and I'm not sure I do either. Anyway, so that was really helpful to find that out. So actually, I'm preparing for next Tuesday to report all that out to the executive staff, and then we're going to figure out what we need to do with that. We do launch new product features sometimes based on it, but I would say we make more refinements. These tools are great for refinements. I mean, the idea of launching a new product or a new feature takes a lot of research, not just by our research group, but our PR group, and also, and certainly the engineering and product development people. So there's a lot that goes into launching new features and new products.
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
sentiment analysis is very helpful to refine and see if there's any friction involved.
I think I recall, Matt, correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think I recall, especially on the new product features launch, you telling us a bit about how directly open text reviews you're getting that are, you're getting into that purpose-built AI are actually allowing you to launch new features. Is that right?
Yeah, yeah. I think I mean really the whole program has kind of led us to understand our customers better, and what types of friction they experience, both with our products, but also just the threat landscape. And there's 2 products that, or an enhancement and some new products that come to mind, thinking about this. One is a feature that we released called Trusted Advisor. And this is within all of our products now: Windows, Mac, Android, iOS. And it basically tries to simplify the complexity of cybersecurity and our product features to give our customers a clear indication of how protected they are and what features they have not enabled yet. Because there are features, like especially on devices, that we can't control for you. Like we need you to, hey, as a user of this Windows machine, here's a setting that's not on right now. If you turn this on, you're protected much more. And so we introduced like this simple graphical experience that is really easy for people to use. It takes the complexity and simplifies it.
And you built that because of feedback you received, is that right?
Yeah, it was both it was both like feedback we were receiving from comments, but also just some of the telemetry that we have in the product to know, well, hey, why is it this number of users has not turned on this protection? What can we do to encourage that? So I think that it was really, ultimately it's probably a combination of all that, getting the feedback, looking at some data we have, and in some cases, like sitting with customers to, try to understand, hey, what specifically is going on. And the other thing I was going to mention is just some of the new products we've launched in the last year. We're really seeing the criminals focus more on attacking the individual rather than the device.
Oh,
So
interesting.
things like getting access to your PII, through breach data, maybe accounts you have
Yeah.
at certain, sometimes very large, seemingly, protected institutions, and exposing that on the dark web and arming that. And I think, one of the things that we're looking really closely at as a company is how AI is going to intersect with this. And what we're seeing is that social engineering attacks is going to be on the rise. And um, so we're using that feedback to think about, oh, hey, what sorts of things can we do as a company to protect people in those ways? And so
Mm.
the future is going to be challenging and interesting in that way. But yeah, with the identity protection, that feedback came from the customers, right? Like, hey, you got these products. Hey, this, here's how I was attacked recently, or whatever. What could you guys do, to help with this?
Yeah, I think it's gotta feel really good to build a product that people want and to help them protect, the things they want to protect and in the ways that they want and what's important to them. I'll also say I'm not going to put you guys on the spot here to say a number, but I do understand that launching those new products leads to significant revenue growth, which is never a bad thing, right? I think that's, probably a nice perk here is the amount of new revenue you've been able to unlock from new product features. Again, I'm not going to put you on the spot to tell us a number, but you can just tell us whether or not that's been
Well, that's
impactful.
true, but I think it's also, it helps with retention.
Yep.
Mhm.
And
Yep.
it helps with referrals, which our customers do are a lot. So the fact is that we listen to them, they know we listen to them, we make changes, or we're working with them to make better, to make the less friction in the products, or educate them into what they need in this very volatile industry. So that has a lot to do with why we're growing.
Yeah.
Yeah, Malwarebytes is just a poster child for everything Alchemer wants, our customers to achieve. It's so nice to hear what, the goals you've set, what you've been able to put in place and what you've been able to achieve. Um, it's wonderful.
They are, to answer your question, they are very effective products. Like, they're
Good.
saying it. Like, people are using them. It's helping people for sure, and our customers see value in them for sure.
Great. Well, moving on to our next section here, I appreciate you guys sharing those outcomes, telling us how you've built your program. For those listening today, who again think this all sounds great and maybe they want to go out and mimic that, I'd love to get your help in talking them through how they can also design, a program, a feedback program that enables product-led growth, and really focus on that trust element with customers. Um, so let's show folks how to do this. Dan, what do you need? What are the things when you guys were putting together your program and as it continues to evolve, what are the things you really absolutely needed in order to build this successful of a program?
Well, we need absolute buy-in from the top and
Mm,
from our general manager. He's very involved and very, I talk to him often about this stuff, and that's probably the most important thing. And he lives it, and so his staff lives it, and so their staffs live it, and then so we live it, and that's really important. That, as well as making sure that uh, we're very transparent with the information we have, making sure that when we talk about what's going on, again, we're not criticizing somebody's kid. We're just trying to figure out what we can do so we can, make our customers happier, and which is good for everything, good for them, good for us. And you really need to, this listening to the customers is important, but we just can't listen to that. We need to be able to take that and really put forth some ideas about how we can move forward. What do we need to do next to make our customers happy? And that's what we do. It's a full circle, and you start with getting their input. You need to end the circle by making sure they understand you've received the input, and that you're going to do something with it. And, and we're doing more and more of that. This program probably started just with NPS about 3 years ago. And this last year we put sentiment analysis, which has really propelled this forward for everybody in the company.
Yeah, that's fast. I mean, 2 to 3 years, and you've put this program in place, and now you've been able to unlock new ways to grow and help
Right.
folks.
And what's very, very important too here, and I know it's not here, and I'm going to say it anyway, but you have to have the right platform and the right partners, to do this. If you don't, and you have to be careful, because you've got to make sure that first, that whoever you bring on board understands where you are today and where you may want to go tomorrow. Because if you decide, every company wants to grow, so you can't, everything changes. So, I mean, I'm very glad that we started with Alchemer, we added Pulse, and it's really helped, propel our product-led growth.
Is there something about when folks are looking for their own program, where there's certain things you were looking for, that would make it easier for you to run your program? I mean, was there anything in particular that's important to think about?
So, and I think, Matt, you may have said this to me. You're not buying a platform, you're buying a company. So as far as I'm concerned, I better be able to personally get along with the company. If I can't, if they're going to treat me like, if you're going to treat me horribly, it's not going to go over well. If they're not going to listen to me, it's not going to go over well. I mean, I need to know that we're in it together, that they're going to help propel us forward and be successful at it. And I have to say, we're really happy, and I'd say in the last 18 months, with the addition to our new CSM person, Katie Arneson, it's just really, it's just been super powered. It's been great.
So, what I'm hearing is look for a program that treats you as a strategic partner and vice versa. Yeah, that makes sense to me. I think when folks think about their first steps, what are the things that they need to do? Obviously, you've talked about finding a great program. Um, I I think it's really important to think, how do you build these agile feedback loops across customer touch points? Like, you don't want your job to be harder because you're setting up or evolving a feedback program. You want it to make your life easier, enable those insights really easily. I think something we always advocate folks to do is to set really clear goals and objectives. I think, as you mentioned, from, your top executives down, does everybody understand goals of the program? Assigning ownership, ideally, again, there's no data silos. So who's doing what, when, how is that information getting shared out? I think it's important to share that information on a really regular cadence, so folks can have an expectation of what's changing across a regular period of time, including stakeholders. We've talked about this at cross-functional work. All of your employees have input. Everybody touches some aspect of the product and or customer, input, and including them, making sure every team gets buy-in here. You guys have done this, created an NPS council. I think it's so smart getting that those cross-functional champions together to review the feedback. Different folks from different teams bring different insights and why things are being said. And I think that's really critical to ensure you're getting every voice represented across the organization. Okay, Matt, now when folks think about how to scale, they have a program, they know they want to do this, they want to evolve, they want to grow. What are some of the really, really specific things that organizations can do to scale, and based on what you guys have done?
Yeah. And before I get into this, I do want to say, like, our business is quite large, compared to maybe some smaller businesses, but I would just encourage a business of any size to be thinking about this from the beginning. It'd be easy to set some of these things in place and let the business scale with it, rather than trying to add them later. I think it would be more difficult.
I agree with you, Matt.
I think that's a great point. I think companies think they're too small, or teams are too small. They don't have the resources, and that's not true.
If you have 10 customers, that's fine.
Yeah. What they say, begin with the end in mind, right? Something like
that. Yeah, that sounds right.
Yeah. Well, cool. So first, we're going to talking about operationalizing our reviews. And so for us, like Diane mentioned, we get the NPS respondents and the CSAT respondents, and based on the scores that come in, we're going to do different things with them. So for those respondents that come in with a 0 to 6 rating, we're going to have customer support follow up with them, and ideally they're going to do that within 24 hours. So we literally have people, like real people, reaching out to other real people. And the gist is, like, we want to understand what the feedback was about. We just want to be crystal clear. Hey, we got your feedback. We want to make sure we understand it, right? Because we're going to do something with it. Now, for some of the reviews that are positive, we reward those reviews. So once again, we're giving some feedback to show like what we value. And I'll talk about that a little more in a second. All the reviews, regardless of the score, are going to be shared internally with every team in the organization. So the way that we do that is we distribute those via Slack in a public channel. So they're there for anybody to look at. And there are going to be certain people in the organization that are, more tasked with that. So it's not like we're putting the data out there and maybe somebody sees it, maybe somebody doesn't. Like there are, certain roles in the organization that are looking at that very intently, but it's all there for anybody to see. And some of the feedback is also shared via email, but we're, being a remote culture distributed around the world, Slack is a critical platform for us. And finally, we syndicate. So within 36 hours, a day and a half of receiving the feedback, and also at the 3-month mark, we'll reach out and we'll ask those respondents to post reviews on other sites that our customers utilize. And so that allows more of our potential customers and people interested in our products to see that. So one thing that's not mentioned in this list that I wanted to add is this feedback that we collect. We also make this available on our website. You can go find every single review that we've collected. And if you go and look, you'll see that they're not all 5-star reviews. Like we share everything there. And that's one of the things that contributes to developing that trust, with our customers, is that we're not holding things back. Like we'll share the feedback there. And so we share that on our website in the form of the actual reviews. So you can look at all of them. We also consolidate the aggregate. So we take what is the average review that we got for particular products, and we make that available on certain product pages. And specifically at the point that our customers are going to make a purchase. And I'll share in a second, I'll share some of the results that we've gleaned from doing that.
Yeah, I do want to mention, go back to one thing.
Mhm.
You mentioned that integration, getting all of the reviews into Slack and then being able to take action. I cannot emphasize how important I think this is to making folks' jobs easier. I imagine, the work that used to have to be done to manually, bubble up every review to the right person in the right channel, getting those alerts set up, I think
Yeah.
that's something that's so critical today. It's really, really important to us here at Alchemer to help folks understand how easy it is to set up any kind of integration. Like you want your data to go where, when, how, and to whom, right? Uh,
Sure.
I think that's such a crucial part of making this program easy is finding, going back to what Diane was talking about, finding a partner that can help you set up those integrations that make your job easier, not harder. Like automate as much as possible. Is that, you guys feel the same there?
Yeah, sure do.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and speed, speed being a factor, right? Like when
Yes.
we get the feedback, the faster we can respond back, the respondents feel heard and valued, right?
Yeah.
If we
Real
happen to
time.
leave large gaps of time in between, you're kind of, you're entertaining like doubt and skepticism at that point, right?
Yeah, I mean, this is personal anecdote, but I know companies will, often reach out to me after I've gone through an experience or bought something. And
Mhm.
when they do it, a week after or 3 days after, or, I've put in a support ticket and they don't get back to me for a week, like I don't care anymore, right? I'm over it. And generally, if it's taken that long to get back to me, I assume that's how important you think my feedback is. So I think
Sure.
that time and automation is so important to making sure customers feel important.
Yeah, absolutely.
So Matt, you've been hinting at impact across the organization, from the very beginning of the webinar today. Um, I imagine beyond just raw outcomes, new revenue, there's other things that folks who are building their programs should expect to see. What are the metrics you guys look at to determine that whether you're having success with the program?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, we definitely see new revenue, and a couple of the stats here that you can see on the left hand of the slide is results that we found when we put our review data on our website and in our web experience. So um, adding the schema, so there's certain schema that you can add to a website that the search engines like to see.
Mm.
And when the search engines pick that up, we see an average 30% increase in click-through rate. So this is where Google will get this data and they'll actually include it in the search listing. As people are searching through Google, they'll see the ratings there, and
Yeah,
that increases the click-through rate on average about 30%, which is huge. Our
I'd take
SEO
that
team loves
increase.
it. Our SEO team loved it when we added this data. And then the other thing that was really significant for us is putting the ratings right at the point that the customer is going to make a purchase. When we experimented with this, we saw somewhere between a 6 and 12% lift in conversion rate there, and we've maintained about a 7.5% increase. And so anybody in the e-commerce space knows that that's a lot. That's a lot. We're doing all we can to get fractions of a percent in some cases. So that was huge for us. And once again, I think it goes along with the trust, right? Like we're putting the information there. Once again, they're not all 5-star reviews, right? They're real ratings, real reviews there that the users can go and click on. But anyway, beyond that, this list on the right-hand side of the deck, it talks about some of the things that have happened as we implement this program. And for us being a subscription-based business, one of the big improvements we've seen is an improved retention rate. So these are customers that have bought the product and they decide to renew. And for us, that's huge. That means that we're delivering a product and delivering value, over and over and over again. And for most businesses, keeping a customer is a lot cheaper than trying to acquire one. But yeah, just all these results here. The real-time alerts that allows us to respond faster. We have better alignment across the team, like Diane talked about. Our customers feel like they're part of our team because of how we respond to them, involve them in this process, and all that stuff. Leads to some of these results we shared.
Yeah, well, congrats on all the success. It's exciting to see and hear how evolving this feedback program has been able to really, allow you to have this giant amount of product-led growth. As we wrap up today, ideally, hopefully folks have had a chance to glean some insights, some help, some things that they can go and do within their own programs and organizations. But if you were to distill takeaways from today, Diane, what's the first thing you'd want folks to know?
Well, I have my top three. One is you need to get the buy-in from the top, absolutely, because that'll make everything easier. If we had to do this again, well, and the person who is our leader wasn't here, but it would have been a lot easier had he been here. So that's number one. Number two, you need to look at this as a program. So it's like a marketing program or something like that. You need to set goals and objectives. You need to know who the key stakeholders are. You need to make sure everybody's involved. You need to make sure everybody's accountable and responsible. And responsible is one of those words where people think, oh, that's bad. But you can also be responsible if something good happens. So I always say responsibility is a good one. And then number three is continue to look for other types of feedback. And I bring this up because over the course of this year, we've added, we've got CSAT and we've got NPS, but we also added for our mobile products, all the input from both Google Play Store and Apple Store, which is amazing. And then there is a product manager who decided to put what he inside the product, 2 places where people could give us feedback from when they're using the product right then. And when we put that in. So those are the top 3 things I'd say are my takeaways to get things going and started.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. Great insights, you guys. I really appreciate your time today. I know we're almost out of time, but I just want to ask, I know you at Malwarebytes are never done evolving your program, continuing to work harder to keep being more successful. Anything you want to share, anything on the horizon you're working on that's exciting, or things for us to look out for in the next year?
We are going to start publishing the results of we're going to start publishing the results of the feedback in our monthly newsletters. And we're going to start telling customers exactly what they said. And they know some of that already, but this is going to get a lot more granular. And it's also going to point directly to the changes that have been made or what we're going to do in the future. And that's going to be a big one.
And I would say, just as a company, look forward to Malwarebytes delivering some really cool innovations and ways to protect you that the industry hasn't seen yet. Look out for that.
Yeah.
Well, it's exciting.
Like cool things coming up.
Awesome. Thank you both for your time today. It's been so wonderful, sharing your expertise with this group. I really appreciate it. And I hope you guys have a great day.
You too.
Thanks. Thanks,
See ya.
Rosie.
Bye.